Good evening. The hour of 6:30 p.m. having arrived.
Recording in progress.
Good evening. The hour of 6:30 p.m. having arrived, I will call to order this regular meeting of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. This meeting is being broadcast live on Spectrum Channel 1302. Anyone wishing to view a copy of the agenda and supporting materials will find it on the city website. To receive electronic copies of future agenda packets, please go to the home page and subscribe to the city meetings email list. The public and other Zoning Board of Adjustment members will be recognized to ask questions and make comments on the agenda item under discussion. After being recognized, all remarks are to be made through the chair. Anyone who wishes to address the board is asked to go to one of the microphones in the room and identify themselves by name and address prior to speaking. I'm going to begin this meeting with the introduction of board members. We do have a new member this evening, so I will ask him, welcome him, and thank you. We're happy to have you. Beginning with myself, I'm Josh Gorman.
I'm Joe Hoppick.
Richard Clough.
Michael Welsh.
Thank you, guys. I guess it's that time of year again. We need to hold a vote for chair and vice chair. So I'll look for a motion. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would move that we re-elect Mr. Gorman as chair for the coming year.
Great. Do I have a...
I would happily second that.
Okay. So I have a motion from Attorney Taylor with a second from Michael Welsh for the nomination or renomination of myself as chair. All of those in favor? It is unanimous. Thank you, guys. And now we move on to the vice chair. Do I have a motion?
Well, I'm also happy to see another year of the same chair-vice chair arrangement. It seems to serve us well. So I'd nominate Attorney Hoppick for the vice chair position.
Great. We have a second.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a second. So we have a motion from Michael Welsh, and we have a second from, and you're going to have to bear with me. Give me your name one more time, please.
Richard Clough.
Great, I won't forget it again. We have a second from Richard Clough. Thank you. Now we move on to the minutes from our previous meeting, which was December. Oh, I apologize. All of those in favor of Attorney Hoppick for vice chair? It's unanimous. Apologize, Joe.
It's okay.
I was just wrote you in as unanimous, so.
You write me off.
So on to minutes from December 6th. Do we have any changes, or go ahead, Attorney Taylor?
Yeah, I'd just like to make one comment. At the end of the minutes, there's a notation that I have reviewed and edited the minutes. I just want to make it clear that I read the minutes only to look for typos, so I wouldn't take up meeting time with going by line. It should be of instead of or whatever. So I just want to make it clear because I don't want anybody to think that I actually edited the minutes.
Oh, right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification, and thanks for the proofreading. Any other comments on the minutes? So at this time, go ahead, Attorney Hoppick.
We approved them.
Joe has a motion. I'll go ahead and second that. Oh, sorry, Michael. Motion to approve, seconded by me. Motions from Attorney Hoppick. All those in favor? It is 4-0. Our new member would not vote on that because he wasn't here. Any unfinished business from staff at this point?
We have the rules of procedure, but we have those on the agenda for after the applicants, if the chair so
Great.
sees to do it that way, that'd be great.
Perfect. Thank
you.
you. This time we'll move on to the hearings. the real reason we're here tonight. We'll begin with ZBA 22-01. That's where petitioner Jessica Guire of 164 Mountain Road in Greenfield, New Hampshire, is requesting a variance for property located at 127 Cross Street here in Keene on tax map number 554-034-000-000. This property is in the high-density district. The petitioner requests a variance to permit the conversion of a multifamily dwelling with 3 units into a multifamily dwelling with 4 units on a lot size of 10,800 square feet, where 21,000 square feet is required per Chapter 100, Article 362 of the zoning regulations. So step on up, Mr. Guire, and just give us your name and address, and then you can proceed with your presentation.
Okay, great. Should I just launch straight into the presentation?
Yeah, after you state both of your names and addresses, we do recommend that you just go through the criteria one by one. That makes it much easier for the board to kind of categorize and then deliberate.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
If I may, Mr. Chair, if just we still have staff input, if the board would so like to hear.
Yes.
Great.
So I'm going to put you guys on pause for 1 second because I do need to hear from staff for background for your property.
Oh, okay.
Do apologize, John.
No, that's quite all right, Mr. Chair. Actually, I'm going to let Michael Hagan speak tonight to this application.
Great. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Board. So this is a pre-existing non-conforming 3-family located in a high-density district. The way it breaks down is you need 6,000 square feet for the first unit and 5,000 square feet for every additional unit. Currently, they have that 10,800 square feet where right now it would require you to have 16,000 square feet for the 3 units that are there now. Again, it's a legally non-conforming lot. So that's pretty much what I have for that.
Great. Go ahead, Michael.
Mr. Hagan, quick question. Is it a lot that would not fit 3 units? Was there a variance applied for and approved to get it to 3 living units?
There was no variance. It was a pre-existing non-conforming.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Attorney Halpert.
Mr. Hagan, can you tell us anything about the parking on the lot, or is that something the applicant will address?
I believe the applicant has a plan now. We do have aerial that does show enough parking on site for what's there now. There is a plan on file that you can ask questions on when they're applying for that 4th unit.
Great. Mike, one quick question, just so we don't have to ask you later. What would the required parking be for the 4 unit? Would it be 8 spaces?
It would be 8 spaces, correct.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mike? Okay, thanks, Mike. If we need you, we'll call back on you. And back to you guys. I apologize for that.
Oh, no problem.
Okay.
My name is Jessica Geary. This is my husband, Nicholas Roga. We just bought this property in January, which is our first home. We're very excited about it.
Jessica, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just so we can get it on the minutes, your address?
Sure, yeah, so that's right, that's what I'm getting to. So our current address is 164 Mountain Road in Greenfield, New Hampshire.
Great.
Our intention is to move to this property at 127 Cross Street. There are some tenants who, they had a condo lined up and it fell through at the last minute and we didn't want to kick them out, so we're waiting to move in.
Yep.
But it will be our primary residence. So in the very near future, our residence will be 127 Cross Street.
Great.
So that's the history of the property. We just closed on it. We're submitting this request because the way that the property is set up right now is it's a large home with an attached barn, and one of the 3 units is built on the 2nd floor and the 3rd floor of the barn, and the 1st floor of the barn is currently unused. And so what we'd like to do is we'd like to convert that bottom space, which is currently unused, into a small studio, which we think would, be a good opportunity to provide different kinds of apartments and, eventually maybe a place where our parents could stay. But, that's in the future. At any rate, I will go ahead and read through the application, which I think covers a lot of the points that we wanted to make. So I'm applying for a variance to permit the conversion of a multifamily dwelling with 3 units into a multifamily dwelling with 4 units on a lot size of 10,800 square feet, where 21,000 square feet is required per section 3.6.2 of the Land Development Code. That's right? Oh, sure, yeah, of course. I just purchased the property in mid-January with the intention of renovating and upgrading it to meet the standards of the neighborhood. Mostly I intend to use one of the units as my family residence, where I will live with my husband and our daughter. She's 16 months old. The building consists of a main house and an attached barn. Currently, there are 3 units, each with 2 bedrooms. They are in the main house and on the 2nd floor of the barn. I would like to transform the 1st floor of the barn into a studio unit. The LDC supports high-density residential districts, and the 2010 Keene Comprehensive Master Plan describes the purpose of such a district. It is to provide housing of various styles, various sizes, and at different price points. Since the district is already fully developed, further development should be in accordance with the existing urban fabric, and the usages should support each other, and the intensity of use shouldn't inflict disturbance on the neighborhood. I believe that transforming the unused barn space into a small residential unit supports the idea of the LDC and the master plan in their true spirit. The restrictions defined in section 3.6.2 of the LDC, dimensions and siding, are supposed to ensure the character of the neighborhood. Open spaces should be preserved, the urban tissue should remain permeable, and the streetscape should remain open and airy. I believe that the variance that we're applying for supports all of these criteria. The shape and the volume of the building will remain intact, and the number of people living at the property won't increase beyond an acceptable measure. The impervious coverage will stay low at around 50%, where 75% is permitted. This will allow for high-quality open spaces that are comfortable to be in and that allow for natural seepage and that maintain local ecologies. The different apartment sizes I will be able to offer if the variance is granted will range from a studio to a 3-bedroom apartment, providing housing for various needs. Furthermore, the variance is in line with the city's expressed desire for sustainable, moderate densification within the center of the city. Currently underused spaces in the building that are already built up will be upgraded. Only a minimal amount of additional construction material will be needed. Moreover, the existing units will benefit because resources like water and heat will be used more efficiently with 4 instead of 3 units, and the insulation of the barn will help minimize emissions of the existing units. So now I'm going through each of the 5 criteria. Number 1, granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest because the existing use and the proposed use are both residential uses. 127 Cross Street is composed of a 6-bedroom, 3-bathroom house that is connected to town gas, water, and sewer. There is already ample parking space for 8 vehicles when they are parked behind each other, but it is easily possible to improve the lot so that each vehicle can easily drive in and out. The variance would not create a higher density of the built-up area since the shape and the volume of the existing building would remain the same. Granting the variance would allow use of the existing space in a more sustainable manner without disturbing the integrity of the current urban fabric or the usages and character of the neighborhood. Additionally, since the variance would allow for the conversion and repurpose of the barn, it would facilitate the rehabilitation and support the preservation and viability of an historic structure. The building is from 1854, which is pretty cool. Number 2, if the variance were granted, the spirit of the ordinance would be observed because the ordinance intends to create a coherent residential neighborhood that includes single-family, 2-family, and multifamily dwellings, along with the supporting uses. Therefore, the proposed variance creates a condition that is substantially compatible with the neighborhood as it currently exists. The LDC states, quote, "The high-density district is intended to provide for high-intensity residential development," end quote. And the 2010 Keene Comprehensive Master Plan points out the need to create housing options for various income groups and various household sizes. Furthermore, the master plan stresses the importance of sustainable further development of the city. Moderate densification is suggested, especially in the central areas, and the conversion of bigger houses into smaller units is explicitly encouraged. The property is located within the high-density district, and its location provides excellent connection to the city center and services. The proposed layout would provide a wider range in apartment size and would make use of currently unused spaces. Granting the variance would therefore support the spirit of the ordinance. Number 3, we believe that granting the variance would do substantial justice because the benefit to the petitioner outweighs any potential loss caused by it to the general public. I believe that the denial of the proposal has no likely benefit to the public. In fact, I believe the neighborhood as well as the city would profit from the small expansion of this allowed use, as it supports the intention of both the Land Development Code and the Comprehensive Master Plan. The attached list shows that several other nearby properties are also varying in a similar manner from the current ordinance. Out of the 30 abutting properties, 18 on the list within the box. This is an attachment that is on one of the pages of the application. I don't know if you guys have that in front of you. Have duplex or multifamily dwellings. 16 that are marked in blue and yellow on the list are on lots smaller than permitted in the high-density district, and 7 marked in blue on the list very similarly or more dramatically than the property on 127 Cross Street in green on the list would be if the variance were granted. Granting of the variance would not cause an increase in impacts to the neighborhood or general public that doesn't already exist. Additionally, the benefit that would be granted to the petitioner is not greater than that permitted to other two-family and multifamily property owners in the neighborhood, yet it would significantly outweigh any negative impact to the general public. Granting the variance would allow the property on 127 Cross Street to be similarly used as other surrounding properties and therefore would do substantial justice. Number 4, if the variance were granted, the values of the surrounding properties would not be diminished. Currently, the barn is in slight disrepair. A renovation of the barn would upgrade the appearance of the building with a positive impact on its surrounding. The intensity of the usage and the usage of the building remain in a similar scope, and the volume of the building would not change. The changes are in accordance with the spirit of the surrounding apartment buildings and single-family houses, and the upgraded house would support the overall character of the neighborhood. Allowing the variance could therefore have a positive impact on the value of the surrounding houses and could even serve as a model for future variances in the neighborhood. The value of the surrounding properties would therefore not diminish. And number 5, which is the last one, unnecessary hardship. A, owing to special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area, denial of the variance would result in a unnecessary hardship because I know fair and substantial relationship exists between the general purpose of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision of the property because the conditions and structures of this property are unique in various ways. First of all, the structures have existed for more than 150 years. They precede the modern ordinance. The property has a main building that dates back to 1854, which consists of about 2,600 square feet of living area and has a full basement. The 2-story barn offers about 900 square feet and was built at a similar time. The upper floor of the barn was recently converted into living space, but the first floor is unused. Furthermore, the physical state of this specific property is worse than that of many of the surrounding properties. The relevant part of the building in particular is in urgent need of renovation, which can only be reasonably financed if it comes with a benefit for the petitioner. Due to unique features in the floor plan, the first floor of the barn remains inaccessible from other parts of the building. It is behind a stairwell and separated by the bathrooms of units 2 and 3. Therefore, the space cannot be added in a reasonable way to either of the other existing units, which would be allowed by the ordinance and would not require a variance. Denial of this variance would effectively disallow reasonable use of the first floor of the barn, thus creating a hardship. When the structure was built, a barn was an adequate use in this area, but today it lays empty and consequently in disrepair. Although a variance is required to allow for 4 units on a 0.25 acre lot, the ordinance provision already allows for the current use multifamily housing, which would not change. The main building, along with the second floor of the barn, which is currently in use, has 3 units with 2 bedrooms each. I believe the restriction of units per lot set forth in the code is a means of preventing overcrowding within a building. This is not applicable to this specific property, as the additional unit would not affect any of the other units or change the footprint of the building. In addition, the necessary amount of parking spaces can be provided on the lot without coming close to the allowed margin of impervious coverage. 75% coverage is allowed, but with the proposed additional parking places, only about 50% of the lot would have impervious coverage. And number 2, the proposed use is a sensible, yes, the proposed use is a reasonable one because the proposed use is a sensible expansion of an already existing and permitted use, and the expansion is well supported by the property and its existing infrastructure. The use is also supported by the intent of the Land Development Code as well as the comprehensive master plan. The master plan specifically mentioned conversion of larger buildings into smaller flats. For, quote, for example, in-law apartments, the conversion of a large home into condominiums can fit seamlessly into the built environment without drastic change to the outward appearance. This type of residential infill allows for a change in density, not a change in intensity of residential use, which in turn supports the community's goal to create a compact, walkable community and provide choice in housing, end quote. And then B, this is the last of it. Explain how if the criteria in subparagraph A are not established, an unnecessary hardship will be deemed to exist if and only if, owing to special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area, the property cannot be reasonably used in strict conformance with the ordinance, and a variance is therefore necessary to enable a reasonable use of it. If this variance is not granted, the first floor of the barn cannot be reasonably used for any purpose, which creates an unfair and unnecessary hardship. All other permitted uses in the zone would have a much more dramatic and negative impact on the neighborhood and would also require variances. Additionally, the other permitted uses would have a negative impact on the current use of the property. Given that there is no other reasonable use that would be allowed for the existing structure within this zone, I am applying for the variance for an additional unit as I believe it has the smallest impact while providing the greatest gain for the property, its abutters, and the community.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicants? Go ahead, Attorney Taylor.
The sum of the square footage,
No, the square footage of the area that we want to convert.
it's about 500.
Attorney Taylor, could you turn your microphone on?
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you.
So it's about 500 square feet, and what do you propose to have within that?
We are proposing to have a small studio unit, basically, so...
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
So we propose to have a studio in that space, so basically a kitchen and, like separate sleeping area and a bathroom.
Thank you. Go ahead.
And what is the area being used for now?
The usage right now is non-existent. It's like basically empty. There's there's trash stored in there right now from the former owner, and like the windows are broken, and so it's in total disrepair at the moment.
So could it be used for storage?
I would say not right now.
But
It would also have to be changed for that, and the building has a basement, so like there would be storage for, like, I wouldn't know what kind of storage would be usable there. Like, if you want to add.
I think there's a significant amount of space in the basement that goes underneath the house. And so there's no additional benefit that would be had by using this space as storage space rather than the existing storage
Yeah.
space that's in the basement.
Yeah, that wasn't my question, though. My
Right.
question was, could it be used for storage?
Right. I mean, I think,
Yeah, sure. I think any space can be used for storage, kind of. It has to be changed in any case if it's supposed to be used for something that has to stay dry or something, either, but it could then also be used for storage, I assume.
yeah.
Any other
Yeah,
questions?
can I
Go
just?
ahead, Attorney Taylor.
Yeah, you mentioned that the upstairs was recently converted into, I think you said, a two-bedroom
Yeah.
unit.
Well, in the upstairs of the barn is one bedroom and the living room of a two-bedroom unit. The rest of that unit is in the main house.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's kind of like the former owner has made some interesting changes to the overall structure that we have to review anyways. But so it's only the bedroom and the living room in that top part of the barn.
And would you have any idea if they received the proper approvals for a living unit? There?
Well, We bought it as a 3-unit, 2-bedroom according to code. So we didn't check if, he didn't have to apply for variance because it was a 3-unit before that. So he only enlarged one of the 3 units, so he didn't change the amount of units. And I assume that he got the permissions to change that, but like, yeah.
Did you check city records before purchasing the property to see if those renovations were done under permit?
No, we did not, but it is in that it's text, like in the text, it is a 3-bedroom, a 3-unit, 2-bedroom. So like the city record knows it is a 3-unit, 2-bedroom each. I'm not sure if that answers the question sufficiently, but.
No, thank you for that. Typically, though, the assessment is what's there. The code department is what's permitted to be there. So
Okay.
sometimes reality and permissibility pass like strangers in the night. So that's the only reason I ask. It's something you may want to look into.
Yeah.
Just check city records. Those are available on the 4th floor.
Okay. If I may, Mr. Chair, so just as a quick review of the files, we did make a determination, as Mr. Hagan had spoken about earlier, in our files of this being a 3-unit building. So I can't speak to the number of bedrooms per unit, but we did check the files to ensure that it was recognized as a
It is
a
illegal.
non-conforming 3-unit building currently.
Great, thank you. I have a quick question for Mr. Hagan. Minimum square footage requirements for a dwelling unit?
Currently, there's one room that requires 120 square feet according to the building code. You do have to have a separate bathroom. So bathrooms can be, minimum size is about 25 square feet, depending upon what you configure and what you put into it. So there's more than enough. I mean, that's larger than some tiny homes and meets the state building code under Appendix Q for the current code requirements. So you could build up to a 300 square foot tiny home and meet all the code requirements for it. So,
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Attorney Taylor.
Yeah, on the chart of the abutting properties that you gave us, where it says size, is that the size of the lot?
Yeah, the first size is the size of the lot. Then the second is the amount of units that are on that lot. Then the third is the size that would be needed according, if it was according to code. And then the last number is basically how much it's over. So our property on 127 Cross Street would be at 193%, so significantly over, we know that. But there are many other units who are like under properties at 254% over and so on.
And just to reiterate here, the green is where our property would be if the variance were granted. At the moment, we are in yellow down here, kind of in the middle of the box.
This is not our property.
Right, so this chart doesn't reflect the actual size of the structures that are on the property.
No, because we don't apply to have a bigger structure. Like the section that we are varying from doesn't say how big the units are. It only says how many units.
Right,
So
right.
it only says how many units are on the property, not how big they are.
But
if-
one of our jobs is to determine whether or not it's reasonable.
Yeah.
So if you've got 4 units in I'm just being arbitrary
Yeah,
here.
yeah,
In a, 10,000 square foot structure,
yeah.
that's probably more reasonable than if you had 4 units in a 4,000 foot structure.
Yeah, I
So
understand.
that's one of the things that we look at is how reasonable is the request. So that's why I was asking that. Thank
Yeah,
you.
Yeah, I looked into that number too, and we would also there, it would have been actually even more in our favor. We would vary less than other properties also there. But I didn't put it on because we do not apply for that specific variance. But also there we would be in a similar, we would not have the smallest units in the abutting properties. We would not have the biggest units. maybe like one thing additionally, we don't apply for variance there, but like there is the attic as well at the moment, which has already 2 rooms in there which are not used, which are not part of the current square footage of the house, which we would also like to transform eventually into living space, for the same reason. It is already there. It is not. It makes in our mind, it makes sense to use the existing built environment to also like house people. And like at the moment, it is just laying empty. And as far as we read it, like, you know, we want densification in the city center and in the high density district. And so therefore we apply for this variance. And then the units wouldn't be as small as they might appear at the moment.
Any other questions? I have a few questions. My first question is relative to parking.
Mhm.
Specifically the 8 spaces. Do you have, you said you had a solution where the vehicles would not be stacked. Do you have a drawing of that or anything?
It's on the screen right now, actually. That is how 8 vehicles, I want to be, I don't know if you see the same screen.
Oh, I
Same.
do, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
so like there are on the right-hand side, you have 8 vehicles. I want to be clear, as it is there, it's bigger than most parking spaces are on, again, surrounding properties. It is not, according to code, that specific parking. But this is what we would suggest. Then we have, because we would not cover as much ground. But even if we would like offer parking to code, we would still be only at like 53% coverage, and where 75% is permitted. So it is easily doable. But we think that this specific layout would make most sense because it kind of ends with a potential terrace and so on and so on. So like the property has at the moment only 42% covered, how's that the correct term?
Impervious coverage.
Impervious coverage, and 75% are permitted. So that shows kind of how much potential there is for additional parking if we wanted to.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, you said that you couldn't really otherwise develop the barn and add it to another unit. I guess if you've already got dwelling space in the barn, and you've got dwelling space to one side of the barn, how is it possible that you couldn't continue that or an existing unit into that space to justify the improvements without adding a unit?
So to the side is difficult. Like if on the same drawing that you see right now, the barn is in the top of the building, like towards the garden, and it goes to the until the first line basically. And right that line is there are actually the toilets, and then you have staircases. So you cannot actually go on the first floor into the barn. You would have to either move the toilets or you would have to move the staircases, which obviously is theoretically possible, but it would like be a different kind of hardship there in our opinion, because it would be extremely complicated to move the toilets, make new plumbing in a different place, and you would have to change the entire structure of the entire layout of the current building, which to go down basically. So the second floor is the bedroom and the living room, as I said, of one unit. The bedroom would be too small to put staircases in there, and the living room, I'm not sure if it would be possible. I haven't I think it would be extremely difficult. I would also it is not that much space as we established. So using so much for additional vertical
Staircases.
for staircases, yeah, that's a different word, would just be difficult. You would have to have external staircases, but then we would actually change the volume of the building, which we don't want to do.
Okay. Are you aware that adding a fourth unit will probably make, you have to address fire safety codes, et cetera, sprinkler the entire building. If this
Yeah, we have
variance
talked
is-
to the department already here in the house. And obviously, we would like then review with them again what would be needed if we get the variance. So we have talked to them, but we have not gone forward with like an actual application, obviously, with them.
Okay,
But, yeah, we are aware.
great. That's all I've got. Any other questions? Michael?
About parking, so the drawing that we're looking at right now is a concept drawing that
Yes.
you folks have come up with, that isn't necessarily one that would satisfy code, if I understand.
Correct.
Okay. But there is space on the lot to expand in a way that brings it into code. Were we to consider the approval of the variance and not want to get tonight into the configuration of the parking or various scenarios and things like that, would it be possible for us to ask for the office, the code enforcement, to get into negotiation with the landowners, come up with a configuration that satisfies them, and sort of in concept approve that as a board tonight?
Go ahead, Mr.
If I
Owens.
may, Mr. Chair, so certainly if the variance were granted tonight, this would, require a building permit to obviously for some of the work that's occurring. At that time, we would be looking, since this would become a 4-unit building, it would also trigger a possible planning review, since it now is, it currently is, and with the fourth even makes it more so of a commercial type structure. So the planning would be taking a look at it, and the parking would be part of that, to ensure that the parking and the lot coverage and such all meet either zoning code and/or the parking standards within the zoning code.
Thank you. Anything else? I guess that's it for now, guys. At this point, I'm going to thank you for your presentation, and if we need to call back upon you, we will. At this point, I will ask from the public if anyone would like to speak on this application. Please step on up. Not seeing anyone, so at this point, I will close the public hearing, and if I have to reopen it, I will do so. We'll begin deliberation, and I guess we can deliberate on the items one at a time if the board sees that fit. So beginning with number 1, granting the variance would not be contrary to public interest. So who wants to begin the conversation? Attorney Taylor?
Somebody else has got to be first besides me. Come on, guys.
We count on you.
I have concerns that this may not be in the public interest, simply because the intensity of the use for the lot and the structure, the intensity of already residential uses in the neighborhood. I drove around there, looking at, how many single-family, multifamily, and the size of the houses. And, quite frankly, I think that one of the reasons that the densities are put in the development code is to help control some of the intensity of use and overcrowding. So I have concerns that it is not in the public use, public interest, and that sort of links to number 2, that it doesn't jive in my mind with the spirit of the ordinance.
Great. Anyone else? Attorney Hoppick?
I'm coming to a somewhat different conclusion on the public interest piece and the character of the neighborhood, because I do think it fits the character of the neighborhood. the intensification issue is gonna be nominal, although, you know, sand through the hourglass eventually piles up, I suppose. And this is only a studio unit. From what I've heard, it sounds like only one person will be living there. And those 8 cars that we saw, one of them will be for that unit. That's what I'm, sorry about that. Want me to start again? Okay. So I'm not convinced that the application is not in the public interest. I don't see a significant alteration to the character of the neighborhood, and I'm not seeing a threat to the public health, safety, or welfare from the information presented. So I have a difference of opinion on the first 2 criteria.
Michael?
I was a chair of the Master Planning Committee that is cited at numerous points in this application, and I do specifically remember the discussions around in-law divisions and additions and things like that, and finding ways to creatively utilize space in a way that increases intensity without density, and I think this is, at least to my inspection, an example of that. I was concerned about the size of the unit that was going to be developed, but I'm convinced now that it's consistent with other small-sized units and no problem there. I also had a concern about the parking, but I'm convinced that, you know, we may see this again if there's discussion about parking and variance, but we probably will not. And I'm also thinking that Attorney Hoppick is right. We're probably going to see 7 cars at this location, not the 8 that will be built into the parking lot. So I'm convinced that it's not contrary to the public interest.
Anyone else?
All the questions I had have been addressed.
Okay. Moving on to number 3, that granting the variance would do substantial justice. Attorney Hoppick?
Setting aside as Michael was talking about, the intensification versus density problem, I think his observation is right. There is an intensification without increasing density, so I'm hard pressed to find a benefit to the public if this were denied. I'm just looking for it and not seeing it. And if somebody can point it out, then maybe I'll change my mind, but right now I think the loss to the individual is not outweighed by a gain to the public, and that would suggest that this criterion is satisfied in my mind.
Anyone else? No other comment?
I guess here I would weigh in agreement with Attorney Hoppick, and I'd also say that I find the comparison with other properties to be a pretty compelling piece of evidence that the applicant has put forward. I'm not sure which category I'd put that piece of evidence into, this number 3 or number 4 with regard to the value of the surrounding properties, but it's seemingly a practice of density and a practice of building that's consistent with other properties in the area.
Okay, moving on to number 4. If the variance are granted, the values of surrounding property would not be diminished.
Following or piggybacking Michael's comments, it would seem to reason that surrounding properties would not be, the values would not be diminished in light of that comparison laid out here. In fact, they could be enhanced.
Attorney Taylor?
Yeah, I don't know how to judge this one because we really haven't had any evidence presented to us on the value issue. Certainly, we've had statements that the barn is in slight disrepair, so renovation might improve the value of this property. So if you improve the value of one property, you're likely to improve, just by implication, at least the abutting property values. So, that probably weighs in favor of the application.
Yeah, I can go either way on this one myself. On one hand, the improvements probably add to the value if done nicely, but on the other hand, the addition of a unit and creating more of a commercial type setting, increased units means increased activity, all the things that can actually adversely impact a neighborhood and its values. So I guess I'm going to have to decide, but I go either way on this one. We weren't given a lot of evidence in regards to this. I also think that some of the baseline for the existing properties and what's there today, I can look at that either way as well, because some of those buildings on the lower part of Cross Street on the Washington Street end, I believe, are overcrowded, and a drive-by tells you so. And I think perhaps that's actually, those properties specifically are a great case in point as to why we establish zoning ordinances. And although those properties are grandfathered in, I do think, when you've got a building that is non-conforming, you really need to be cautious when you make it more non-conforming. It already has a pretty reasonable use. It's got 3 units. I think moving a toilet and a staircase is probably less invasive than recreating an entire barn to add a unit. So I do think the space can be used. So they can certainly find other feasible ways to make the use of their space in a wise manner. Adding a unit could be one person. It could very well be 3 people. You don't know, and there's no way to mandate that. So if you end up with an extra unit, you're increasing your chance of overcrowding. The intent of the ordinance, to me, is to reduce overcrowding. With all that said, I'll move on to number 5, and that is owing to any special conditions on the property that distinguish from other properties in the area, denial of the variance would result in unnecessary hardship because no fair and substantial relationship exists between the general public purpose of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property, and because the proposed use is a reasonable one. Anyone? Attorney Hoppick?
I guess I'll start with this one. I'm not persuaded there are special conditions on this property. I don't think age alone of the building is sufficient. Oh, shoot, sorry. Let me start again since I just started. I'm not persuaded that special conditions on this property have been demonstrated. Age of the building is not, in my mind, a unique feature, especially in that neighborhood. All those homes are old. And I'm looking at the applications further, and I just see the square footage, that could be, a special condition, but there's no comparable evidence, so. And I agree with Josh, I'm not sure it's inaccessible, the first floor of the barn is inaccessible from other parts of the building. And relocating a stairway and a toilet would be a lot easier than renovating the whole thing. So I'm just troubled by that lack of a piece of information.
Anyone else? Attorney Taylor?
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Hoppick. I'm just not persuaded that there's a special condition of the property that distinguishes it from any of the other properties. It already has reasonable use of the property through 3 units, and certainly I agree that that's potential to make use of that either with another unit or storage or something. But reasonable use goes to the property as a whole, not just to a 500 square foot area. So I'm at a bit of a loss to see the hardship here.
Michael?
I'm not sure if hardship is the phrase I'd use, but it feels kind of in that direction. And that is, I find it compelling, if not convincing, that renovation of the space needs to be motivated by something, and that the renovation of the space for the purpose of developing storage doesn't seem like it's going to motivate the kind of investment that would bring the other benefits, improvement of the property, the property values, the surrounding area, things like that. And so I think that if I'm thinking about the motivation of renovation that would allow the space to be used, this is the best purpose for that renovation of all the choices that are available in current code. Everything else would require a variance and probably not be consistent with the neighborhood.
Attorney Taylor?
Yeah, I'd like to just add one thing, and that is running through this explanation that the applicant provided regarding hardship is, the financial benefit, the financial need. And as we've discussed previously on a number of variance requests, financial can be a consideration, but it can't be the underpinning, the sole reason for the hardship. So that's another concern that I have with this.
On to number 5B. Explain how, if the criteria in subparagraph A are not established, any unnecessary hardship will be deemed exists if and only if special conditions of the property that distinguish from other properties in the area, the property cannot be reasonably used in strict conformance with the ordinance, and a variance is therefore necessary. I think we covered that.
Yeah, and the same problem with this one, there really isn't a special condition of the property identified. And I'm not sure how far we get with that problem at the forefront.
Yeah, I think where I land on this one is that they have the complete ability to renovate the space and find a way to add it to an existing unit, which could potentially save substantial amount of resources and still perhaps get more revenue, more use out of the building. But I don't think it's mandated that if you have unused space that automatically means you have to turn it into an extra unit. I think you can certainly develop it, but turning it into an entirely separate unit where you're already non-conforming, I just don't see a hardship there. So, anyone else? At this time, I guess then I'll ask if we have a motion. Attorney Hoppick?
This is the first one of the year, right? 2201?
Yep.
I would move that we approve 2201.
All right. We have a motion from Attorney Hoppick to approve 22-01 and a second from Attorney Taylor. At this point, we will run through all 5 criteria, vote on them. So, beginning with Number 1, that granting the variance would not be contrary to public interest. All of those in favor? 3, all of those opposed? To 2. 3 to 2. Number 2, if the variance are granted, the spirit of the ordinance will be observed. All in favor? It's 3. All opposed? It's 2. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. All those in favor? It's 4. All of those opposed? 1. And number 4, if the variance are granted, the surrounding property values would not be diminished. In favor? It's 5. And moving on to the unnecessary hardship, 5A, that owing to special conditions of property that distinguish from other properties in the area, denial of variance would result in unnecessary hardship because no fair and substantial relationship exists between the general public purpose of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property, and that the proposed use is a reasonable one. All in favor? 1. All opposed? To 4. And on to 5B, that explain how, if the criteria in subparagraph A are not established, any unnecessary hardship will be deemed to exist if and only if, owing to special conditions of the property that distinguish from other properties in the area, the property cannot be reasonably used in strict conformance with the ordinance, and a variance is therefore necessary. All in favor? All opposed? It is, it's okay. 1 to 4. Are you you're in favor or opposed, Michael? Okay. 1 to 4. Thank you. Final vote on ZBA 22-01. All those in favor? 1. All opposed? 4. Thank you for your time, folks. Good luck with your property. John?
A second motion, Mr. Chair, to deny.
Oh,
and a vote
correct.
through.
Yeah, at this point, I'll call on the board for a motion to deny.
I would move to deny 2201.
We have a motion to deny from Attorney Hoppick. I have a second from Attorney Taylor. All of those in favor of denying ZBA 22-01? All of those opposed? 4 to 1. Thank you. Okay, at this point, we'll begin ZBA 22-02, where the petitioner, Alec Doyle, Colonial Theater, 95 Main Street, requests a variance for property located at 95 Main Street, tax map 575-008-000-000. That is in the downtown core district. The petitioner requests a variance to permit an internally illuminated, electronically activated changeable copy sign where electronically activated changeable copy signs are prohibited per Chapter 100, Article 10.3 of the zoning regulations. At this time, I will call upon staff for a brief introduction. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Currently, there's an existing sign. Didn't take dimensions to see if it was conforming or non-conforming, but it is existing sign that's been there for a long time. It is a changeable copy sign that is manually taken down and put up, and the applicants are seeking to put in an electronically activated changeable copy sign. We'll let them go forward, and if you have questions, we can kind of go from there.
Great. Sounds good, Mike. Thank you. Michael?
All right, just a quick question. In the sign ordinance, why are, and maybe you don't know the answer isn't right out there, why are these kinds of signs not permitted?
It's a great question. The answer I give to everybody is that's the way the ordinance was written. There's a lot of history behind ordinances and we could go back into it, but currently, the way the sign ordinance is written, it's not permitted. I could give my own opinion if you want to hear it, but I won't. So it's, yeah, it's the way it was written.
Anyone else? All right, thank you, Mike. We'll call on you if we need you. At this point, I'll welcome the petition. Yes, Attorney Taylor?
Yeah, could I just ask one question about the
Sure.
code? As far as the districts are concerned, I got really confused, and I noticed it's not on the application, and I know you're going to update it. But
So-
could you explain something about this particular district that this is in?
If I may, Mr. Chair, so this property is in the downtown core, one of the newer districts that was created. And just so it's clear that the electronic activated changeable copy signs are prohibited in any district within the city. There's some signs, some districts allow certain kinds of signs. There are some additional requirements for the downtown core that certainly if this variance were to be granted and a sign permit applied for, that the staff, Michael, would be looking at. A couple of them being the downtown core has some specific colors that need to be adhered to, where in other districts, that's not necessarily a requirement. And one of the other concerns that we'd be looking at as staff, if this were granted, that we would want to make sure that the sign doesn't trigger what would be considered an animated sign, because that's also would be a prohibited sign, which is not what the applicants before you tonight for a variance from. They're applying for electronic activated changeable copy sign. I know some of these signs can get pretty elaborate as to what they can do. So certainly we would have some concerns to make sure that this was not something that would fall under the definition of animated signage, which would be a prohibited sign under the sign code anywhere within the city as well.
Michael? Oh, sorry, Jeff. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow that up because I was trying to look through the code that admittedly is going to take me a really long time to get used to. And, the description of the downtown core is really small. I mean, it's one really short paragraph. So how do we cross-reference to know what is allowed or not allowed?
So this would be, if I may, Mr. Chair, this would be, as the applicant has probably cited the section, as there is a specific section under the Article 10.3 that has a
Right.
list of the prohibited signs.
Right.
If this was, a different type of sign, we'd have to get into within the code, there are different requirements for the different districts. But as I stated, this is a case where this type of sign itself is prohibited throughout the city, and that's covered under Article 10.3 under prohibited signs.
Well, if I may, that I found, but, if we're supposed to be looking at things like the spirit of the ordinance, and things like that, it's like, how do we figure out what the spirit of the ordinance is when the ordinance is described in one really short paragraph that frankly doesn't say anything?
If I may, Mr. Chair, again, that would be, and staff can certainly, if you have these questions, we can certainly go through the code. But there is a section within the sign code portion of this that speaks to the downtown core. Again, that's the one that has some of the more limitations, restrictions on the signs. Again, mostly coming down to colors. There's also sections in here that speak to size of signs. But again, I would just initially go back to that this is, really covered under the 10.3 as a prohibited sign regardless of the district.
Attorney Hoppett?
John, maybe you know this. But does the downtown core go down to Cumberland Farms?
So the downtown core has expanded a little bit, but where it used to stop was right at the Works Bagel. And then from there down was actually Central Business Limited, which was part of the Commerce Limited signage and so on and so forth. So that's where you see more of those internally illuminated. Now that it's expanded down, you would see a little bit more prohibitive. But yeah, it stopped at that time. It went from central business to central business limited.
Well-
If I may, Mr. Chair, so right now, the downtown core goes down to Eagle Court. So no, it does not make it to the Cumberland
Okay.
Farms.
So at the risk of sounding dense, I'm giving myself credit, what's the difference between an electronically activated changeable copy sign and an illuminated sign? 'Cause to me, they're both the same. It's an apple and an apple. It's not.
No, it's not. The illuminated sign is not going to be changeable copy. It's going to be, you'll see that in a lot of other districts where the sign, a lot of times it'll be a, plastic, plexiglass type, sign face that has lighting behind that but it's not changeable. This is where that you can actually just, change the sign copy electronically, as opposed to, as the Colonials currently has to do, is have somebody out there with a ladder and, sliding the letters out. This would be that they could change the wording, the sign copy inside at a
Okay.
computer.
Well, I see that for internally illuminated signs, there are a number of exceptions, but none of those apply to where we are. In this zone.
So currently, I believe, and I can certainly let the applicant speak, I think currently that their current sign would probably be non-conforming, in that I believe it's already internally lit, that with, the sign copy over that. So that part, it sounds like it would not, isn't going to change. Most of your internally illuminated signs are in the downtown core, are restricted, and they're meant to only be inside the window. Basically, what it's trying to cover is the open signs.
Right.
To allow for an open sign, those that you see, those LED open signs
Do
that
you
are
know how-
internally lit.
Do you know how many electronically activated changeable copy signs we've approved in this city?
I don't. I know there's been several that have been before the past over the years.
I recall a few.
I think probably the last one that comes to mind would be the Agway.
Wasn't Burger King and Cumberland Farms also on the list at some point?
Not that I'm aware
Burger
of.
King's not
I
ringing a
think
bell?
Burger King they wanted a second one. So they were allowed to have the
Right.
electronic changeable copy, but they wanted two of them. And a couple of our fast food places have applied for that. Wendy's, I believe McDonald's.
If I may correct, yes, we see a lot of the drive-through that have come before the board to ask for a second menu, basically a menu board type sign for their menus. We have changed the code to allow those by right now, because we were seeing that as a trend, that a lot of the drive-through places were
Okay.
trying to create stacking lanes, 2 lanes to free up some stacking. But that would be a different type of sign as opposed to what the applicant's before you tonight.
Michael?
Just by way of coming to some confidence about what this is not, I know that there's an illuminated, I guess it would be an animated sign on the Spalding Gym at Keene State, and I know that didn't come before the board or city review because it's Keene State, but that's an animated sign. And I'm also thinking about the middle school has, a sign that I'm not sure if that's a changeable copy or also an animated sign.
So if I may, Mr. Chair, Michael's correct. I think I'm not sure about the one on Keene State, but again, they would be not subject to our zoning code, and where the zoning code obviously is where the sign code sits, as well as the school board. I do know the one in front of the middle school, again, it's electronic copy sign that does have some animation that's available, and again, I think that's where we just need to the board would need to take in consideration along that line that since they're not asking for a variance from one of the other prohibited signs, which would be an animated sign, that'd be a consideration the board take into consideration if they were to so desire to approve this variance tonight.
Anyone else? Nope. All right, thanks,
One
guys.
quick-
Oh, Attorney Taylor. Sorry, I'm not looking to my left tonight as quick as I should.
Yeah, I'll be offended later. Could we possibly in our packets for next month have like an 11 by 17 version of the map that's on the screen now? Because I can look at it on my computer at home, but I mean, I kind of like totally lose reference.
If I may, this map that you see in front of you should actually be in your books. Towards the very front, I think that Corinne might have tabbed your books for you. And in the very beginning, you'll see where it says zoning maps, and there'll be a previous zones, as Michael had spoken to, for the downtown with the central business and CBL and all that. And then on the next page would be the new downtown core and some of the other new districts that have been created. If you don't, we can certainly get the members a bigger copy if need be. I know that feeling well. Okay, we can make sure we get copies of them out to the committee.
It certainly will mean that we won't have these dialogues quite as long.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you. Did you have a question?
I just want to addition, on the subject of other changeable copy signs in Keene, I believe it's, did you hear me?
Yeah, I do need you
You can hear
to
me now.
actually just state your name and address.
Sure, of course.
So do that just for the record and then go ahead.
Brian Warner, my home address is 34 California Street in Swansea. Just wanted to add one thing. I believe it's Kapoloff Insurance on Route 10,
Oh, yeah.
just past the Rotary, has a changeable electric copy sign. I'm not sure if that qualifies for the zoning, but yeah.
Thank you. So at this time, thank you, staff. We'll call back upon you if needed, and we'll welcome the applicants. And you don't have to introduce yourself again, okay? So go ahead, guys.
Great, thank you. I'm Alec Doyle, Executive Director of the Colonial Theater. My address is 56 Elm Street, Keene. I want to thank the board for hearing our request tonight, and also for providing a really nifty short history on illuminated signs in Keene, and outlining the general points and summary of our project too, all at one time. So you've saved me a lot of energy here. I am going to assume that, and also we are, Brian is a Colonial staff person. We're also joined tonight by representatives from Sousa Signs, as well as Watchfire, who is the manufacturer of the sign in question that we're contemplating. I'm going to assume that you folks are very familiar with our written application, so I'm not going to go through the 5 criteria point by point. I'm glad to do so if needed. I think we're just going to provide a summary or add to the summary that's already been provided on what we're trying to achieve here. I don't think we need to talk a lot about the place that the Colonial holds in the community as the last remaining historic theater, and the fact that the sign in question is also a historic landmark. It was added mid-century at some point. It's not the original sign of the theater, but it was added mid-century at some point, and it's been in operation since then, with all the good and bad that goes in with that, including all of the maintenance and requirements and the inability to find replacement parts and all of the above. The sign, the illuminated part of the Colonial sign, there's 3 areas of illumination. There's the top portion, which is a neon sign, Colonial sign, which we continually maintain. The chase lights, which are the little flashing lights that run around the 2 edges of the actual signage area. And then there is the signboard itself. And all we're talking about is the signboard itself. The signboard itself is, in fact, already illuminated. It's got a rear illumination with fluorescent bulbs that sit behind a milky, sort of quasi-opaque plastic material. And as was described, the actual lettering is a variety of aluminum and plastic and other letters. It's very difficult to find these in this day and age, replacement things like that, that are hand-placed on the sign. Every time there's a change, it requires a staff member to climb onto a ladder and make that change. And a lot of those changes occur during the bad months here, because most of our programming occurs between October and May. So there's a life safety issue with that, both for the employees as well as the public. The changes that occur often have to occur twice in one day because of the nature of programming, which occurs at night, where it's prepped for the evening show, and then when the show goes down, it's prepped again after the show for the next morning, and on and on and on. So the technology that's been described, which is automatically changeable, meaning no one needs to go outside, it's all changed from within electronically, is a great advantage for not only for life safety, but also for our ability to be current and to provide messaging and signage, not just for the Colonial Theater, but also for our community members and for our supporting businesses and for what have you. I will tell you also that there's a 23-letter limit on per line on the sign, so which essentially turns you into a telegraph operator, meaning the limits there, when we have a business or a corporate or something like that, and we have a show title as well, we have to be very creative around our abbreviations and trying to get messages across. Obviously, with a digital sign, we can manipulate that in ways to increase or decrease font size, and that'll make that problem go away automatically. We are, as part of our big project, our major renovation of the entire theater, which I'm sure people are aware of, this is one of the key pieces as well. And the overall sign itself is going to be undergoing a lot of internal work because the wiring is mid-century, and there's always problems with it, and we're hoping we're hoping that we can address a lot of those. We decided early on, neon is not easy to maintain, as folks know, or if you don't know, it is hard to maintain. It's a pain in the butt. But we made a commitment early on that we feel as though that the most iconic piece of the marquee is really the neon Colonial on top of the sign, as well as the chaser lights, that those are really, really important. And, but it's called a sign for a reason. It's supposed to provide information to people. And the proposed electronic changeable lit sign, again, is going to allow us to increase our ability to message, increase our ability to be responsive in messaging. We do have community messages often up there, and with the ability to change that on a moment's notice from inside, could be used, because of our location on Main Street, could also be used for messaging for general public good as well. Should there be some emergency downtown or something like that, we can always, plug a message into there very quickly. And it's pretty amazing how many people notice the Colonial sign when we put signs up there during COVID, for instance. We were putting a lot of signs up with trying to sort of build community spirit and that sort of thing, and a lot of people responded to that. So obviously, a lot of people see the sign. Those are the major. I think that's the major rationale behind us wanting to make this improvement to the sign. Again, it already is an illuminated sign. We're simply asking that the illuminated central message portion be changed to a easily changeable contemporary technology. The illumination of the center message center there, it will not change. It is not going to be brighter than the fluorescent tubes that are lighting that center section now. We're not going to have. We like to leave our animation and entertainment for inside the theater. So we do not contemplate having big animated content out there as well. And I think I'll leave it there for questions.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
I've got one quick question. First, I just want to say I'm really thrilled to hear that you're keeping the cool old parts of the sign, because I've been seeing that sign since I was a little kid, and it is certainly part of our history. So that's great to hear. But as far as the section we're discussing, is it going to be streaming, or will it just be stagnant words?
Well, hopefully they're not stagnant, but they will be static. They will be static. Yeah, it'll be primarily just static, not unlike what you see now. It'll be a static lettering.
Okay.
And maybe with an image, yes. Still image, yeah,
Right,
thank you.
that's,
Still-
okay,
Still image, yeah.
that's the word I was looking
Yeah.
for. Thank you.
And keep in mind also, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we will have the capability to, in a sense, replicate the font of the existing sign. Yeah.
So are we talking like black and white like it is now, or is it going to be,
We can do black and white. We might find that we want to have
some colors?
maybe a little color in there because it sort of screams for it, you know?
Yeah.
We do put colors up on the marquee as it is during the holidays. We put colored bulbs in all of the chaser bulbs and things like that. So maybe something along those lines, yeah. Again, it's not going to be drawing more attention to itself than it does already.
All right. Great, thank you. Anything else? Go ahead, Attorney Taylor.
Yeah, does this have to go before Historic District Commission as well?
Our understanding is that it does not.
Okay.
Yeah. All of the rest of our renovation, the facade of the building and all of that, and the back of house and all that went before the historic district, so.
Anyone else? Not seeing any questions. We appreciate it at this time. Does the board wish to hear from public at this time? No more questions for the applicants?
We can circle back to them if necessary,
Great.
right? Yeah, okay.
Okay, at this time, I am going to call on the public. I'll begin with anyone who may be in favor of this application, and I'll welcome you to step up to a microphone and speak. Not seeing anyone at this point, I'll call to see if there's anyone who is opposed to this project who'd like to come on up and speak. No? Okay, great. At this point, then, without any more questions for the applicant, I am going to close the public hearing. We'll have some deliberation on the items, and if we need to call back upon you, I'll open the public hearing and do so. Thank you. So beginning with criteria number 1, that granting the variance would not be contrary to public interest. Attorney Hoppick?
As I see this, and I think the applicant explains it pretty well here, the application says the only change will be the technology utilized to light and create the signage area. Now, that to me says that the only difference between what this sign will do and what the sign presently there does is save the guy the trouble of going up a ladder between May and October, or October and May, rather. And I assume, hopefully, that nobody's going to be losing a job over this, but my main point is that being the only issue, there really is no harm to the public interest if the variance is granted. There certainly is a nostalgic harm, but for our purposes, that's somewhat irrelevant. It's going to look the same, from what I can see. And you're just going to have an easier way to change the letters and promote your movies and other shows and whatnot. So that being the only change, technology, I can't imagine we can't accommodate that. So I don't see any harm to the general public. And of course, if that's the only change, then it will not alter the character of the neighborhood. It'll be the same. The lighting will be the same. It's not going to be any brighter or any darker. It's certainly not going to be noisy. So I assume it's not going to be noisy, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Michael?
This gets to sort of the nature of the question I had right at the very beginning about why these signs might be prohibited. And I was imagining sort of a distracting, animated, things running across. I was also imagining bright, and those, being perhaps detrimental to the experience of walking downtown. I understand now that it's not going to have animation. The brightness, though, is that going to be something that's set into the sign itself? I mean, how do we know it's not going to be brighter than what we
So,
have?
Yeah, I would ask either the folks from Sousa or the sign manufacturer, they can address that question, actually.
My name is Ed Keene. Do you need my address or anything like that?
Yeah, it can be your work address, though.
I'm with Watchfire Signs.
Yep.
We're based in Danville, Illinois.
Okay.
I'm from Manchester, New Hampshire. Usually people are telling me to be quiet, but I can use this. So as far as the lighting of the sign, our signs are equipped with a photocell, so they actually adjust to the ambient light. So midday, noon, when the sun is directly on the sign will run at 100% brightness, which allows you to see the image and not be dim or dull in any way. As the day progresses and becomes, twilight and nighttime, the sign will automatically dim all the way down to 10% of its max brightness. So in no way is it offensive as far as the brightness level, and it's actually a benefit, whereas internally illuminated signs, their brightness is pretty much static all the time. You can't really change it. This will automatically adjust to ambient light and be more pleasing for a downtown area.
Thank you for that, and that helps me feel convinced that it wouldn't be contrary to the public interest in the ways that I imagined.
Great. Number 2, the variance to grant, the spirit of the ordinance would be observed. Attorney Hoppett?
Again, along the same lines as I was speaking about earlier, this proposal will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood, and it's not going to be a threat to the public health, safety, or welfare. I can't imagine any set of facts that would support any of those conclusions from what we've seen here and what we've read in the application. So I would support that factor being satisfied.
Great. Anyone else? Attorney Taylor?
Yeah, I agree with Attorney Hoppick, and I guess I'm just a little surprised in the ordinance, the way it was written, that it really doesn't seem to allow for technology to be upgraded. So that's just a comment.
Great. Anyone else? All right, on to number 3, granting the variance to do substantial justice. Go ahead, Attorney Hoppett.
Maybe this case illustrates how all these criteria are interlinked, because seeing that there are no issues on the first 2, I'm hard-pressed to find a gain to the public by denying this application. I just don't see how it would be a gain. Whereas the loss to the individual would be higher costs to maintain outdated and antique systems, and frequent interruptions, safety issues that Alec mentioned. And I guess I think that the third criterion is satisfied as well. I think the gain to the public is, there is no gain by granting it. There's no loss by denying it. But conversely, with respect to the property owner, there is a loss by denying it. And I think we've identified them.
Great. Anyone else? Number 4, if the variance is granted, value of surrounding properties would not be diminished. Anyone? I'll just take this one real quick, I guess. I just feel like their efforts to maintain the historical integrity of the sign by keeping the neon colonial as well as those race lights, what those were? Sorry, not up on my sign jargon, but anyway, I'm really thrilled about that. And when I first saw this application, probably similar to Michael, I had visions of like a Jumbotron style thing happening. And thinking that it's going to be tastefully done and will not adversely impact anything, and the renovations are looking great. I think there's probably some value being added there, inarguably, so.
And I agree with that.
On to number 5. Owing to special conditions of the property that distinguish from other properties in the area, denial of variance would result in an unnecessary hardship because, 1, no fair and substantial relationship exists between the general public purpose of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property. Attorney Hobbit?
Well, certainly one of the conditions, special conditions of the property is that it's a downtown theater, and that makes it unique. It's been operating for, I can't remember, 100 years?
98 years in this point, yes.
Okay, longer than any one of us have been around. So those are two unique features, and I think coupled with that is the technology piece to this, and that's really all this change is going to amount to. So that unique property with the non-unique changes that technology goes through, I think it ought to be permitted to evolve naturally the way anybody would use technology today. The impact on the entire area is going to be almost nominal, so I think that's at least 2 special conditions we can utilize that would support an unnecessary hardship.
Attorney Taylor?
Yeah, plus, I agree with that, and plus the fact that the special conditions and the way that this is going to be developed, there doesn't seem to be a real, if I understand the lighting correctly, there doesn't seem to be a relationship between how they want to upgrade and renovate the sign with the way the ordinance is written. So I think this fits quite well with that, and I think it's a reasonable request.
Great. Anyone else?
Nope.
I think it's very reasonable as well. Do we have a motion? Attorney Hoppick?
I'll move to approve 2202.
We have a second. All right, we have a motion to approve and a second. And beginning with number 1, as soon as I find it, that granting the variance would not be contrary to public interest. All of those in favor? It is unanimous. Moving on to number 2, that if the variance is granted, superior ordinance will be observed. All in favor? It's again unanimous. Moving on to number 3, the granting the variance would do substantial justice. It's again all in favor. Again unanimous. And number 4, if the variance is granted, the value of surrounding properties would not be diminished. All in favor? Again unanimous. On to number 5, unnecessary hardship. 5A, owing to special conditions of the property that distinguish from other properties in the area, denial of the variance will result in unnecessary hardship because no fair and substantial relationship exists between the general public ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property, and that the proposed use is a reasonable one. All in favor? It's again unanimous. Final tally on ZBA 21-22. All those in favor? It is unanimous. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess at this point, we will do our unfinished business and new business. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I'm going to let Corinne.
Great. Thanks, Corinne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In our rules of procedure, we do have the one line, or the draft that I have in your packets, that one line that we would like to strike from the rules of procedure. This would be to have our rules of procedure more in line with the land use code and the requirements for our zoning applications. The line that we propose to strike does state the 200-foot shall not include the width of any street or streams. We would like to have that removed, since it's not noticed within any of the requirements for abutter submittals for all of the applications.
Any questions? Don't see any.
Well, I'm looking it up
Oh,
now.
okay.
The definition of a butter in the state statutes, doesn't that include streams and streets?
It is the same, we have the same definition in our land use code as is listed in the state RSA.
John?
If I may, Mr. Chair, so yes, a direct abutter would still be somebody that's directly across the street or a stream. You would be considered a direct abutter. What we're trying to eliminate right now is, because the way it's worded is the 200 feet that's there is minus streets and rivers. So a lot of times you end up pulling in people, and I'll use, we'll keep picking on the, down by the Main Street and 101 intersection. That's a very wide right of way right there.
Right.
So if you were to use that, then all of a sudden you're jumping on the other side of the street and then going still another 200 feet even further, where the state RSA would still require you to say if we had an application before us at 15 King Court, that obviously they would have to notice Andes and Agway that are directly across the highway system from them, but they were also then being required to go another 200 feet even further beyond that, which is not what the RSA says, and it's also not the requirements that we have in place for other boards and that require a butter notification. So at this point in time, we're trying to align these requirements up so that they're the same. We get some of our, especially our development professionals that'll come in that'll sometimes apply for variances, or sometimes they're applying to the planning board, and they get confused because each board has a different a butter notification requirement. So we're at this point really just trying to line them up, and it does line up with what the state RSA requires for direct abutters and butter notification.
And I agree with that. Looking at 672:3 right now, thanks to Corinne's handy book distribution. Do you want us to vote on this tonight?
I would certainly leave that up to the board if they're comfortable with it. If they would want to vote for that change, that is certainly fine. If not, if they want a little more time, we can certainly put this off and put it on the next agenda for a vote.
Attorney Taylor?
Yeah, I think this was before us originally in December, maybe. And because
You're right.
nobody had looked at it, we wanted to put it off. So I'm comfortable on voting for it tonight. I don't know how others feel.
Judging by the nods of heads, including my own, I count 5 people comfortable with voting.
Yep.
So we have
Do you want a motion?
motion. Yeah, go ahead, Attorney Taylor.
Okay, I'll move that we adopt the change to the rules of procedure for application. So this is what, section 2AD, maybe? Regarding abutter notification materials.
We don't have the page before it, so we don't know what it is.
What was in the? It was it's on page 5 of the rules of procedure.
I second that.
We have a motion from Attorney Taylor and a second from Attorney Hoppick. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Any other business from staff?
Not at this time, Mr. Chair.
Well, I guess that makes this meeting adjourned. Thank you, guys. Have a good night and a good month.